bad feeling about this.
Welcome, San Diego Comic-Con attendees, to the Last Last Jedi Debate. Yeah, this is where you applaud. My name is Chris Gore. I'm the editor of Film Threat and the co-host of the Film Threat podcast with Anthony Ray Bench. And I want to welcome you to a jam-packed panel to discuss The Last Jedi. Before we get into that, and before we get into everything related to it, I do want to make mention of a friend of the geek community, close friend of all of ours on stage, John Schnepp, who was... John was supposed to be on this panel, and I just wanted to say, for those of you who didn't know, John was the host of Collider Heroes. He was also the director of The Death of Superman Lives, What Happened, and director on Metalocalypse, a great friend of the nerd community. He's passed away tragically, and I just want to let you know that, and it has affected a lot of us. So if I am not all there, I think that explains it. Let's get into it and have a healthy debate as a tribute to John, because one thing I know he loved to do was debate about nerd stuff, one of his favorite things to do. So I'm excited that we're going to continue this in his honor. We have a jam-packed panel. I've had more requests for people to be on this panel than any panel I've ever done at Comic-Con. So while there's so many people on stage, I turned away twice as many people in terms of being on this panel. It was absolutely impossible to choose, like boats on the Titanic. So, but we have a format that we're going to stick with, and it's very simple. It's debate team captains. Captain of Pro TLJ debate team is Charles de Lauzirika. Captain of the anti-TLJ squad is JC Reifenberg. And we have a whole group of nerd experts, people from different walks of life. I'd love to introduce, I'll introduce all of them quickly, but we're going to take it outside, I think, at the end and continue this discussion because there's just way too many people here. Nikole Zivalich, Annie Cruz, Dante James, Steele Saunders, Robert Meyer Burnett, Cliff Stephenson, Anthony Ray Bench, Travis Langley, Dr. Travis Langley are all here representing their sides of the argument, and we'll see if they stick with their sides or maybe they could be swayed to join a different team.
Can Travis start all his points with "as a doctor"?
Right, pretty much. What I would like to kick off with is some opening statements from our team captains. I know this is something you didn't necessarily prepare for, but you've been thinking about this your entire life as a nerd. I'd like to hear an opening statement from each of the team captains. You know some of the topics we'll be discussing. JC, we can start with you. And I'm going to ask 1 minute, an opening statement before we get to questions.
All right. I think that as we do this debate, what I think it's important to focus on is not necessarily what happened, but the reasons why. That people may not care for what happened in The Last Jedi. And I think a lot of that might be rooted in The Force Awakens as well. And I guess as we go forward, being on Twitter and watching just the thread that's been about this panel, hopefully everybody who's listening and everybody who's in this room understands that we're all friends up here, even me and Steele Saunders. And we all come from a place of loving Star Wars for many, many, many years, and that's why we're all so passionate about feeling the way we feel about it.
Great. Opening statement from team captain Charles de Lauzirika.
All I can really say is that I saw Star Wars for the first time when I was 9 years old, opening weekend in May of 1977 at the Mann Chinese Theater, and it more than rocked my world. It fundamentally changed me as a human being, for better or for worse. And since then, it's almost been like a quasi-religion for me. I know that sounds ridiculous, but I've put so much thought into this universe. It is kind of ridiculous when you think about it, but that was the joy of growing up in that era, which I feel like the era today is radically different, a radically different time. So I came to Star Wars and its sequels and prequels with an enormous amount of love, and each time out, the reaction was a bit different, for sure. But the one thing about The Last Jedi that I think really, really did for me was it gave me a sense of surprise and unpredictability that I hadn't felt since The Empire Strikes Back. And that's what I think George Lucas tried to do when he started to want to do his own homage to Flash Gordon and Buck Rogers and the old serials, was like that exciting next chapter. You know, it was like, what was going to happen next? And that's why I love The Last Jedi, because for the first time, I feel like I don't know what the roadmap is. I don't know what's next, and I love that. So I would say that's where I'm coming from with my love of The Last Jedi, and I'm sure we'll get into the nitty-gritty details, warts and all.
Well, great opening statements. I will say I'm a little disappointed. You guys are just getting along way too well. This doesn't sound like a debate that we were all thinking we would see, especially when you see what people are saying on Twitter. But let's start with our first question. Here's how this is going to work. Our team captains may choose to answer the question and address the question themselves, or they could send in a team member that they feel is best suited to answer this question. So that's how this is going to work, and you'll each have a minute to discuss, a minute to address your point, and 30 seconds to rebut. And we'll see how this format works. You ready, guys? The first question, and Charlie will keep it with you and come back this way. So Charlie, choose. What makes The Last Jedi so divisive?
I'm going to give that to Robert.
Well, I think what makes The Last Jedi
Speak into the mic, sir. You need a microphone.
I think what makes The Last Jedi so divisive is it's a film that does not give people what they want, much like life, which is one of the reasons I love the film so much. We saw a Luke Skywalker in the film unlike what we'd hoped to see. The heroic Luke Skywalker, the reluctant Jedi who didn't want to learn the ways of the Force and become a Jedi like his father until Uncle Owen and Aunt Beru were killed. And then he changed his tune and he faced down Vader. But the thing is this, that's not easy. As you get older, life intervenes, things change, things get in the way. He had tragedy in his life. He had unexpected strife that he didn't expect, and he realized that perhaps the Jedi way was not so great, because after all, if you think about it, what we saw in the Star Wars franchise, the Jedi allowed the Sith to rise to power, and the Jedi are corruptible, as Luke witnessed, and he felt that corruption in himself, and it was so shocking. He felt that the only choice that he had to make was to send himself into exile.
Your time is up, sir. It's now time for JC to address the question. What makes The Last Jedi so divisive, JC? As team captain, who do you choose? And you can choose yourself.
So I'm going to take this myself, because this is something that I feel very strongly about. And I actually agree with absolutely every single thing you said. My point of contention comes from when you're making a movie, the number one thing you have to do is set up rules and establish rules. And if you are coming into a movie universe as the 9th movie in the series, I believe it was, right? Because it came after Rogue One, there are certain rules of the universe, of characters that you need to adhere to. Now, you can break rules in a movie, but if you're going to break a rule, if you're going to fundamentally change the way that we've seen a character for over 40 years, you have to give justification on screen that shows the change in that character. It cannot happen in a period of time between Return of the Jedi and The Last Jedi. And
time. 30 seconds to rebut. Robert?
That's ridiculous. I mean, there's 30 years that we did not see in the films. We saw Luke at the end of Return of the Jedi. 30 years have passed. The First Order arose after the Empire was shattered. Somehow the galaxy allowed the First Order to arise. They allowed Starkiller Base to be built. The New Republic was obviously somehow corrupted, and so was Luke. His dreams were shattered. What they fought for at the end of Jedi, with the Empire being deposed and the Empire defeated, it didn't work out. And so Luke was, as many people are, was broken. He was disillusioned. And his victories, such as they were in the 3 movies that we saw him, were all for naught.
Time, JC, 30 seconds to rebut.
So the question is, why is The Last Jedi so divisive? And the answer to that is quite simply, when you change a hero, a beloved character, and you don't give adequate justification, everything you just mentioned happens magically when nobody, unless you've read thousands of novels, knows that period of time. So why is it so divisive? It's so divisive because they didn't justify the choices they made in a way that the audience accepted.
So you're saying it's so divisive because
we have to move on to the next question. I'm sorry, Steele. We're sticking with the rules here.
I just don't know if JC's watched the last 45 minutes of Return of the Jedi.
All right. Well, okay. Well, wait a second. So let me just a moment. Also, as a point of clarification, I'm not sure if it's the 9th film if we're counting things such as Caravan of Courage and the Ewok movies, which I own on Laserdisc. So just a point of correction of fact there, JC. My apologies.
Party at Gore's house to watch the Ewok movies after Comic-Con.
Okay. Our next question, and JC, we'll start with you. Are these new characters, Rey, Finn, Rose, Poe, are they strong enough to someday become as beloved as the original trilogy's Han, Luke, and Leia, Vader? 1 minute and to respond.
I'll pass the lightsaber to Nikole and let her take this one.
Sure, okay. I think they absolutely could. I think that they need to establish a lot of things, and it's sort of what you were saying about how the series has skipped so much what has happened. Star Wars and Lucasfilm has built this universe with the books and the cartoon series and now these movies where they're building up these characters, and the characters in The Last Jedi specifically haven't been given enough backstory. They haven't been given enough motivation. They haven't been given enough time to grow. I mean, Last Jedi takes place over a few hours, and they've changed so much. So yes, these characters absolutely have the opportunity to become as beloved, but there's so much that the Lucasfilm needs to do to establish these characters and allow them to grow and explain where they've been, and explain where they're going, and explain what their motivations are. And I think there's so much potential there, but I don't think we're there yet.
Okay, 1 minute. Charlie, who do you choose, or do you
I'll
choose?
take this one. I like to believe the audience has some imagination, that they can meet the filmmakers halfway. I find the most engaging stories to be the one that leaves some blanks for you to join in on and try to like immerse yourself in the universe rather than have everything explained to you, handed to you on a silver platter. So, look, I think these characters could, in time, be as beloved as the originals. I'm going to say probably not, even as a lover of Last Jedi, because frankly, the pop culture explosion of Star Wars 1977 was so deep and so resonant that everything after that is kind of a ripple or an echo of that. However, I'll say that the one thing The Force Awakens did wonderfully, and J.J. Abrams should get credit for, is establishing some extremely engaging characters in that film. And I will say this, I'll probably be laughed off the stage, but I think Darth Vader is certainly probably the most iconic villain in movie history, but I think Kylo Ren is a more interesting character. I think he just has flaws and dimension that Vader, as a thug and a baddie in Star Wars, aka A New Hope, was just, I mean, he looked awesome. He did great stuff, but Kylo's actually got some stuff under the hood that I'm interested in.
Time and 30 seconds to rebut.
I'm going to jump in on the rebuttal. I agree with you 100% on Kylo Ren, actually. But what I'm going to say about these characters is that in A New Hope, you watch Luke and Han become heroes. And in these movies, Poe and Finn and Rey are presented as heroes already. And I think that's why their journey doesn't resonate with you the same way that Luke Skywalker or Han Solo's does.
Okay. Rebut?
How is Rey presented as a hero already?
She can fly the Millennium Falcon without ever having flown a ship, through a Star Destroyer, do loop-de-loop. She raised herself without parents. I don't see a problem put in front of Rey that
You begrudge that she's an orphan?
that she has to. She's not challenged by anything. And if you watch like Rogue One, Jyn Erso is challenged every step of the way in her path to become a hero, where Rey literally just is able to fix any problem that comes her way without sweating.
Okay, so Luke was basically the same character then, because Luke apparently was a great pilot, but we didn't see that. He drove a land speeder around, the same way that Rey has her speeder that we saw her in for the first act of the movie. She doesn't get into the Falcon until the first act is over. So I guess what I'm saying is we have approximately the same amount of Luke expertise that in Star Wars that Rey has in Force Awakens. So I don't see why this whole thing of like the Mary Sue thing with Rey.
No, but it's
Your words, not mine.
No, it was established though in A New Hope that
Yeah, didn't you see
Luke
where he
had
had the
some
ship?
Luke had some
Oh, the
fighter
toy ship.
training.
Yeah, when he's doing a little toy thing. That means he's a great pilot.
No, I mean he had some fighter training as far
How
as.
do we know that?
it wasn't
How do we
quite-
know that by the time that Rey is by the time we see Rey in Force Awakens?
Luke's
How do we know
backstory
that?
is that he drove around a pickup truck with his friends and shot like
Swamp rats.
That's
like
training.
animals. Like he is like a blazing hick. No offense, but he is one Kentucky space character. All right. Like, dude, if someone of your friends at Comic-Con said, "Oh yeah, last night we were driving around shooting like 2-foot animals," you'd be like, back away now. Like, I'm not going to give you the laser pole, right? And I know no one said Mary Sue, but like those comparisons and like the actual definition of a Mary Sue is like a writer injecting themselves. Now, Star Wars was written by a guy called George Luke that had parents that his dad wanted him to go into the family business, and he wanted to run to Hollywood and have an exciting life. Now, I don't see how you can't see the parallels with Luke Skywalker and George Lucas.
All right, let's move on to our next question. I want to keep this moving. Who do we go? So we go with Charlie now, right? Like, yeah.
I think it's actually back.
Okay, so JC, we're going to start with you. True or false? Luke Skywalker's attitude and actions in The Last Jedi were out of character.
Are you on my team?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
Do you want to take this one?
Yeah.
Or I can take it
You
too.
can take this one.
True or false? Luke Skywalker's attitude and actions in The Last Jedi were out of character.
I'm going to say it is untrue. I think they are in character. I think that the problem with it is that his actions on screen. I'm going to go back to my previous statement. Steele, yes, I have seen the end of Return of the Jedi, and watching episodes 1 through 6, it's very clear. Like, yeah, Luke says "F you" to the Jedi in Return of the Jedi, but you still have to show why. And if you look at filmmaking, like the low-hanging fruit of filmmaking is flashback and voiceover. And if you're going to tell me the justification for Luke Skywalker behaving the way he does and wanting to kill his nephew after he was the guy who told his mentors, F you Yoda, F you Obi-Wan, I'm going to go save my dad because I believe in love. And now you're telling me that he's going to kill his nephew because of a 14-second flashback scene, which, again, like, it's Walter Murch. It's like some of the best editors in the world are like, don't use flashback, don't use voiceover to explain expositionally how your character got to where he is. And I think that's, at least personally, why I felt ripped off by Luke's journey. If The Force Awakens had been a movie about Kylo Ren's fall and Luke Skywalker's disillusion, The Last Jedi and his journey through it, I am 100% on board with.
Time. Charlie, who do you
Can I
pick?
take this one?
I'll give it to Steele because he kind of asked for it really quick.
Luke Skywalker for me his character was inspirational. That he's an inspirational character. When he looked out to the twin suns on Tatooine, that said to the audience, like, you've got a dream in life, no matter what it is. You should get off your ass and go do it. Don't listen to the excuses. So I always found him, like, I grew up in Australia and I wanted to move to America, and I moved to America, and that scene was, like, I used that as inspiration. Now, Luke Skywalker in Episode 8, like, the way it concludes where he saves everyone and then sets forth this myth that he stood in front of the First Order and fended them off himself, which was then brought, Broom Boy's telling his friends about that. He's gone on through that act to inspire the galaxy, whether it's, real or not. Star Wars is that real or not? It's not real, but it inspired me to do something. And then the characters in the film are inspired by that. And I think you have to take into consideration the end of Return of the Jedi. Like, his dad tried to kill him as he found out that he had a sister and he had to, like, fight the dark side, and it left him battered. Like, it changed him forever. And the sad thing about Star Wars is we didn't get to follow up on that in 3 years' time in 1986. So we had so much time to drift off where we thought Luke Skywalker was going to go. And, Rian Johnson his way where it was going to go. And I think with all these debates and stuff, the thing is, like, even if you don't agree where it went with, if you can sort of see where the writer got that idea for that direction, I'm always like, oh, if there's a reason, it's like, it sort of makes sense to me, because I just don't think like, Empire Strikes Back came out and people hated it. So we're never going to agree on what goes forth in Star Wars. But if we can sort of see the legitimacy, we can enjoy it.
I'm sorry, I'm going to cut you off
I mean, my rebuttal is I agree with every single thing you just said in terms of character motivation. I just don't agree that the steps they took to let the audience know why Luke got to this point were justified. You have to extrapolate through subtext from a movie that came out in 1983 and then ignore the movie that came before Last Jedi to get to your conclusion of Luke's justification for his character in The Last Jedi. I believe your justification, but the fact that you have to sit up here and explain that to an audience full of people, and that's why Luke is the way he is,
okay,
that's the problem.
What about in The Force Awakens, where Han Solo says to two characters and the audience, Luke, like, was it didn't go well, so he went into hiding. Like, didn't he just say? He just saved you 3 novels.
That's expositional dialogue placed into a movie. Like, it's cheap. Like, the number one rule of filmmaking is show, don't tell. And if you have an audience, if you have a character say something to you, you have no reason to believe them. If I'm like, Steele, you're my best friend. Or if I'm like, Steele, you're my best friend. Like, show, don't tell. Give me an action in the movie that dictates how I feel about you, because words are cheap. And if you watch The Conversation, which is a Francis Ford Coppola movie that was nominated for Best Picture, that's what that whole movie is about. Is like, you can't use dialogue to convince somebody that what you're saying is true. You have to show through action. Talk is cheap, right? Action shows everything.
All right, we're moving on. We're moving on to the next topic. What humor worked and what didn't work about the humor in The Last Jedi? One of the biggest complaints about Last Jedi that has been heard is the humor didn't work. That humor just didn't work. Who would like to take this one? Team Captain Charles de Lauzirika.
I'm going to bring Cliff into this just to get him warmed up, because he's going to hulk out later.
I'm literally shaking.
Cliff Stephenson.
Wait, does this? All right, yeah, wait, hang on. All right, I'm just talking. Okay, so humor's always been in Star Wars, and it's always been. George Lucas is not a particularly funny guy, and so the jokes in Star Wars, where he's going to Tashi Station and things that Yoda says, and I think that this is a little more modern in terms of what they're doing and the jokes that they're telling. But I think the kind of corniness of it is very much in line with every other film that came before. In fact, I would say that the problem with the prequels is that they're not that funny and they're not corny enough. So it used to make me nuts when people would say he makes a Yo Mama joke. It's not really a Yo Mama joke. He's just saying he's holding for your mother. It's not it's like. He's not saying, your mama's so Sith. It's just, he's just saying, like, yeah, but it also, in what Robert said, it sort of throws you off a little bit. It's not what you're expecting. You're expecting something maybe a little dour and a little serious and a little more straightforward. And they're kind of having fun. And they're basically saying, like, we're allowed to have fun. We're allowed to be a fun movie, crack a couple of jokes. Do all of them hit? No. Do all of the jokes in Airplane hit? No. Do all the jokes in any movie hit? No. So there's always going to be things that make you laugh. There's always going to be things that you go, I didn't find that all that funny. So I don't understand why we're holding The Last Jedi to some different standard that 100% of the humor has to hit, or else it's a failure on every comedic level.
All right, JC, your team is taking it.
Okay, so this is the problem I have with the humor, is that you say that it's not supposed to hit, or not 100% anyway. They set up almost every line almost like it's supposed to be a punchline, and then waiting for the audience to laugh at it. Starting at the beginning of the film, when Poe was having his banter with, I forget the tall, pasty guy who was running the ship.
Hux.
Everything
Hugs,
on the panel.
actually.
or hugs,
General
but
hugs. guys.
everything he said, it seemed like he was waiting for the audience to laugh after each line, and it was basically forced humor. And the things that we weren't supposed to laugh at, I think we laughed at. Like Luke drinking alien tit milk. Like that was a funny scene. I don't know if it was supposed to be funny, but I know I laughed. The problem is that I don't know if it's a Disney thing or if it's a Rian Johnson thing. I don't know, but I just feel like the humor was extremely forced.
Forced, I get it.
No pun
That's the
intended.
funniest joke in Last Jedi.
No pun, but yeah, it just wasn't. I felt like they were trying to walk the line that most of the Marvel movies walk, where it's action and then there's humor. They tried to walk that line, and I feel like they completely failed.
Your 30 seconds to rebut.
That's why it's called a sense of humor. You either sense that it's funny or you sense that it's not funny. And a lot of people, every screening, I saw this thing 9 times theatrically, and every time I went to see, most of the laughs were consistent in every screening. So again, you may not find that joke funny. For every one person that doesn't find that joke funny, one person did find that joke funny. And so, again, you can't say everything is a failure. The humor is a failure in this because it clearly hit for half the audience. I mean, I can't speak definitively on the numbers, but when I saw it in screenings, people laughed. And so...
Hang on, I'll tag in really quick. And also, it's consistent with Poe in The Force Awakens, because we first meet Poe, and he's with Kylo on the planet, and he's kind of like, say, do you talk, do I talk? I can't hear you through the... I mean, that's Poe's humor, so it's like, I think it's completely consistent with the previous film.
Right, but the previous film, it felt more natural. It didn't feel as natural in The Last Jedi.
Okay, if we're going to talk bad Star Wars comedy, C-3PO, Geonosian Arena, I love Star Wars all my life. That is a low point in Star Wars for me. I was enraged by how bad that was.
So I'm going to say this. Absolutely right. Star Wars has always had humor, and it needs humor. And that's something that George Lucas has spoke about at length, how Star Wars needs humor. I think the issue is that for the first 3, episodes 4, 5, and 6, the humor is rooted with C-3PO and the Ewoks, right? And then for a little bit Yoda while he was doing the sage sensei Japanese warrior kind of trope. The problem in the new movies is that Han Solo is the source of humor instead of the source of sarcasm, and Poe and Finn and Porgs and Chewbacca and Leia and this, and it's like, is this a cast of comedians or is there comic relief?
But
who
wait,
is
hang
the
on,
comic
hang on.
relief?
But when
in the
you
movie?
see Chewbacca sitting on the side and he's got the cooked porg and he looks down
That's not
and he
funny
sees the
also.
fat porg,
It's sad.
is there anybody who didn't laugh at that? I mean, is there anybody who looked at that and didn't think that was funny?
I didn't think it was funny because there was like 14 other jokes stacked right before.
Right, but if
and
you
I was
saw
like,
like 2 people raise their hands, everybody else thought it was funny.
It was like
that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, 2 people out of like how many though?
So the end result is they should have had Paul Feige direct it and cast Paul Rudd and all the Judd Apatow people, because the jokes probably would have landed better.
Wow.
Like there's just too many comic relief characters in the movie. Like give it to Chewbacca and give it to Poe, and like let Finn be serious.
All right, well, we're moving on for time's sake. I'm sorry to cut this one off. I'll allow for continued debate, and I hope to get through all these questions so we can get to open debate. But from humor to the dark, I need to ask, was it a good idea to kill Snoke? I know there were a lot of Snoke theories out there, but the brutal death of Snoke in the middle of the film was a shocker, and I want to know how you feel about that. JC, we'll start with you, and then we'll go to Charlie's team.
All right.
Okay.
I would say no, it absolutely was not. In Bloodline, they established that the First Order is very new. It's been in the secret, it's been in hiding. The New Republic, as far as we know, don't know much about it. That's why Leia started the Resistance. We know so little about the First Order, what their motivations are, who's actually calling the shots, how much of their ships are in the Outer Rim. Like, there's so much about the First Order we don't know. For there to be a Force wielder who is Snoke, who's an alien race that we're not sure of, that has this much power, the power to link minds, and for them to not explain that at all, to not give us any answers. And I'm so hopeful for a book. I think a book would have to do it. A comic series wouldn't do it for me. I need to know more about the First Order. I need to know who Snoke is. I need to know why he's powerful. For them to just assume that I'm going to remember how bad the Empire was and apply all that to this movie felt like a real disservice.
All right, let's your response.
Just really quick, I'm going to bring in Anthony, but what do we know about Palpatine in Return of the Jedi? Virtually nothing. So I feel like we know more about Snoke
I
at
knew
this
he was
point.
the Emperor. But
you're asking for like a whole detailed backstory on Snoke. We didn't have a detailed backstory on.
We know he's the
Palpatine.
Supreme Leader.
Anyway, hang on.
The First Order
isn't an established thing yet.
I'm just going to jump in.
Moderator.
The difference between Palpatine and Snoke is that you didn't have Han Solo, Luke Skywalker, and every other main character for 40 years blaming Snoke or blaming the Emperor for the fall of everything. Meaning, the central point of The Force Awakens and Last Jedi is all about Kylo Ren's fall. And you watch 2 hours and 20 minutes of The Force Awakens, and then you watch an hour and 10 minutes of The Last Jedi, and then Snoke is gone without any explanation. So, Han, Leia, Luke, oh my gosh, their characters got to where they were based on Snoke. Kylo Ren got to who he was based on Snoke. And through dialogue for the entirety of Force Awakens, you are shoving that down people's throat, that Snoke is the reason for the First Order, for Kylo Ren's fall, for the disillusion of Leia and Han's marriage, for Luke Skywalker going away. That's the reason. And then in The Last Jedi...
JC, I'm sorry, I got to cut you off, and sorry, just for time.
Anthony, jump in.
Yeah, I'm totally tired of arguing about this movie. I didn't want to be on this panel in the first place. I'm going to be like Luke Skywalker and fade into the twin sons of Tatooine and hand this over to Anne Butler.
Wow, I'm really glad I
Anne
went
Butler joining the stage.
Wow, a run-in.
An act of self-sacrifice by Anthony Ray Bench. Admirable. Marianne, how do you respond to this?
Hey, 51 minutes, it says. 51 minutes left.
I don't need all my answers handed to me. I'm more willing to wait if the answers will be revealed in the next film. Like, I never thought that we were going to get the full backstory of Snoke in Last Jedi. Like, I never thought that was going to happen. I figured that we would maybe get a little bit more, but not the full story. And blaming him for the disillusion of a marriage that maybe wasn't meant to last in the first place is, like, not the best leg to stand on in this. And
I mean, that's stated in dialogue in The Force Awakens. So that's not me, that's J.J. Abrams.
I just don't see, like, even the screen time. Like, Empire Strikes Back, he was a hologram, and then the Emperor was in, like, a lot of the end of Return of the Jedi.
It's not a one-to-one comparison, though.
Yeah, but I'm going to make it. And in The Force Awakens, he's a hologram, and then he's in the throne room.
Steele's going to use alternative facts on this.
And, like, I just think that if we put ourselves in an 80s mindset for what we accepted about the Emperor, and then you went, all right, let's put that mindset with what we have about Snoke and the First Order, it's very similar. A cameo in one film, a throne room scene in the other, and we've got some backstory. And we are in different culture now where we demand the source books now. Like, in the 80s, we just make stuff up in the playground, and, like, that was the law. It's we need to go back to that a little bit.
All right, I'm going to move it on because we have so much to cover, and I'm sure Snoke is going to come up again. But let's cut right to the chase. Was Luke Skywalker's fading to light a fitting end for the character? This is the complaint we've heard from many of the people who are dissatisfied with The Last Jedi. There's a group of people who are trying to remake The Last Jedi, which they may in fact do. So,
yeah, what a tribute to Carrie Fisher in her last role.
So was Luke Skywalker's fading light? Was that a fitting end to the character? Charlie, you want to take this one? Your team take this one.
Sure.
Steele wants
okay.
Let's do that.
I made T-shirts. I went on about my podcast, Ignite the Green. I just wanted to see Luke Skywalker. I wanted to see Sail Barge Part 2. That's what I wanted, because that was the only way I could interpret Luke Skywalker being a hero, was when I found out he was like this all-powerful Jedi in Return of the Jedi, my favorite scene of all time, the greatest thing ever projected on a white bit of wall. And The way he faded off, it didn't give me what I wanted, but then about 2 hours after the film, I realized that
Check your mic, Steele. I think you might
Okay.
turn it off on accident.
that I wanted Luke to be a hero. I could only imagine it with the lightsaber, but the way he sort of saved everyone and in a non-violent way and with those moves, about 2 hours later, I was talking to my wife on a podcast and I just started bawling because I was just he was a hero still, but he did it in a total different way, and that to me is why, you could part of me would love to see Sail Barge Part 2. That would be sick. But I can see why Ryan went that way, and I accept it. And to me, he was still a hero in a brand new way, and that's why I loved it.
Does anybody else?
I mean, I'll say
strong
that
opinion?
Go ahead.
Real quick, I just said that I appreciate his storyline in the way that it parallels Yoda, because that basically was his only connection to the Jedi, because the way Luke talks about the Jedi, you would think he was there for any of them, and he wasn't. I think that the problem that I have with Luke is that I like that he found peace. I like that he is one with the Force, and that there's a lot of potential for him to become a Force ghost, basically. But I feel like the Luke that I grew up with and have been reading about, and the only book he really had was Heir to the Jedi, I guess, in the new canon, wouldn't have given up with that much fight left. And I feel like that he still had so much to give, and that is why I had issue with him ascending into the ether.
He didn't give up.
And I guess a problem that I had with that whole thing was the fact that it was established early on in the film that Rey confronted him about the fact that he wasn't in touch with the Force anymore. Mm-hmm. And so for him to be able, and I'm not trying to get into Jedi physics here or how this works, but for him to be that powerful enough to cast an illusion that Kylo Ren couldn't see through, where he was actually physically fighting a Force ghost, and he hasn't used the Force in who knows how long, it just didn't seem believable to me at all.
The thing that makes sense about the Force blocking out is, if you look back to Empire Strikes Back, if Luke was in touch with the Force during that time, he was just sitting on that island foreseeing his best friend Han Solo dying and just going, yeah, I'm staying here. So I think Ryan, he had to come up with a device that didn't make Luke, that he wasn't just disbanding his friends. That's what we love about Luke Skywalker, is that he, when all the chips are down, he comes in and helps his friends. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, but he didn't come in and help his friends.
Yeah, I know, but that's why he had to be cut off from the Force.
He projected himself.
But if he didn't cut himself away from the Force, he was sitting there watching Force TV, watching his nephew kill his friend.
Can I get really divisive here? So it's kind of like Luke's Kobayashi Maru, right? He found out a way to do both. He found out a way to save his friends and not sacrifice his values.
I can't accept any Star Trek references.
References.
Sorry, Jason.
Right? I'm really trying now. I'm really trying to amp the blood pressure up here with people.
I still say he's not dead. Characters who have physically passed into the Force within the movies, we don't know for certain they're dead. And to have the chance of a director thinking of this too, having an amazing triumphant return, which they considered with Ben once upon a time. He had to do that in this film to have the opportunity for that potential, for finally something in the movies to really amaze him.
So does he do the Professor X then, where he transfers his consciousness into that little boy at the end of the movie? Is that Luke?
Ben, Yoda, and Luke, their bodies have all physically passed into wherever they physically are, but their bodies have gone somewhere.
Or Luke could have got on the Falcon with Rey and went back to the Salt Planet and physically helped Leia.
But we're talking
and
about the
rebellion.
disappearance. We're not talking about the other things he could have done at the moment.
I'm just saying that's why the Force Ghost doesn't make sense to me at all.
All right, let's move on to another question. Through the films, they basically sort of tossed away this idea of the chosen one, right? Being a Skywalker as a chosen one. You have Rey, who came from nothing to have strong powers in the Force. How does that sit with you? That concept being dejected, and let's go with Charlie's team to start.
I'll take it. I think it's absolutely brilliant that Rey comes from nothing and is a nobody, and her parents are nobodies. It's inspirational because it means we can all achieve a level of greatness or heroism, goodness in this universe. And for her to be another sort of entitled chosen one, another sort of like, Muad'Dib or whatever, it's kind of like, I kind of feel like Luke was a kid. He was just like this kid in a backwater planet. And yes, he eventually was connected to a higher sort of family line or whatever. But I love Rey. I've really come to love this character. And I especially love that she comes from nothing, because her triumph will be far greater than any triumph we've seen before, to come from nothing to the absolute level of greatness, which I hope she achieves. Or maybe she won't. Maybe she'll fail. And again, that's a big lesson in The Last Jedi, is that we have to learn from our mistakes. We have to learn from our failures. So I think this trilogy is evolving in a very interesting way, and I can't wait to see how it turns out. I hope they stick the landing, because right now, I think these characters are interesting, they're detailed. As far as Star Wars goes, they're pretty complex, and I think that, I really hope they don't retcon this into Rey is suddenly, Han Solo and Kira's daughter, which is the stupidest theory I've ever heard.
Real quick, I'll jump in on that. I honestly don't care that she's from nothing. I just want them to justify the fact in some way that she is the most powerful Jedi that we've ever seen. Just give me a reason why, right? Give me a reason. She's the next chosen one. She's got more than 18,000 midichlorians, whatever it might be. Just give me a reason why.
Why do you need that? Why do you need that reason?
What about the Snoke line?
Because
Spend so much time on it.
In Force Awakens, they basically try to allude that maybe she's possibly a Skywalker when Maz makes that comment about the lightsaber being attracted to her, and how, it used to belong to Luke Skywalker, used to belong to his father, and almost kind of alluding, okay, is she related or not related? And then all of a sudden, The Last Jedi happens, and they're like, oh, she came from nothing, she's nobody, okay.
Remember in 1999 where the Swedish
right?
lady says, I got pregnant and I didn't even have sex? And there was like a magic force baby in there. And we went, yes!
Hold on, that answers your question. Anakin is so powerful because he's the chosen one. Luke is so powerful because he is the son of the chosen one. Why is Rey so powerful? Like, everything has Yoda is so powerful because his midichlorian counts over 9,000. Why is Rey so powerful?
Because Snoke tells Kylo Ren, darkness rises and light to meet it. The Force is awakened because of Kylo Ren's growing evil power. And the balance of the Force has created Rey to meet the dark.
The midichlorians created her. The Force.
Whatever. If you want to read the sketch book.
I think this means we win. I think this means we win, right?
He changed teams.
All right, we've got very limited time. I've been given the wrap-up signal, so my apologies. I'm going to ask one final question, and then after this question, we address it on the panel. We're going to take the debate outside to the streets of San Diego, and we're going to continue this podcast outside of this of the auditorium, where we'll have a mobile recording kit. We're going to keep this going.
Ignite the green, Steele.
Ignite the green.
I'm coming for you.
Okay, me and JC are going to talk over each other for the next 2 days of the call.
Right. You can continue it on Twitter, but let me ask this question, please. Final question for the panel. If you loved The Last Jedi, tell me what you disliked most about it.
Oh.
Wait. And if you disliked The Last Jedi, tell me what you liked most about it. So what did you like?
Okay. My favorite part of The Last Jedi, which I think might be the best scene in any Star Wars movie, is when Luke is on board the Millennium Falcon, and he's like, oh, R2, I quit. And R2 shows him the hologram of Leia from when he was a boy. And in that moment, what Rian Johnson was able to achieve is a weaponized nostalgia for the audience. It's the ultimate fan service moment. But it was more than just fan service, because it was also weaponized nostalgia for the character of Luke Skywalker, meaning that R2 was playing on Luke's nostalgia the same way that Rian Johnson was playing on the audience's. And in that moment, as an audience member, I connected to Luke Skywalker in a way I never have, because in that moment, Luke and I felt the exact same way.
Okay, no, wait. If everyone could address this, take like 10, 15 seconds and address it. If you loved it, tell us what you disliked. If you disliked it, tell us what you loved. And let's go down. And
Which one am I supposed to answer?
Whichever you like. Okay, so Nikole and we'll go down, and everyone will get an opportunity.
Yeah, I'll be very quick. I like the the direction they're going in the things that they're establishing. I think there's so much that they need to explain, but I think it's amazing the powers that Snoke has, and I would love to see more about that. And I want to know more about the First Order, and I want to know more about the Outer Rim, and there's just so many things that I feel like they've hinted to that I want to know more about.
Okay, 10 seconds, everybody. Down.
My favorite part, where's Han? The parts that just eat up at me. Finn and Rose accomplished nothing.
Okay.
Which was the point.
Sorry. Okay. Annie.
I did not like it, but I actually kind of agree with JC on that the nostalgic moment with Luke and R2-D2,
Cool.
pretty much.
Dante.
For me personally, I do like the fact that they're moving on from the Skywalker storyline and creating something new now.
Great.
My least favorite part was the Maz Kanata hologram. If you've been on the new Star Tours, it's better on that. It should have been a hologram of Lando Calrissian, and it would have been dope.
Right.
My least favorite part is Canto Bight, but not for the reasons you think. It had nothing to do with the meaningless plot or whatever, which I disagree with. I think the design in that sequence is disappointing. It's very earthy, doesn't feel like a Star Wars galaxy far, far away location. The games look like they're right out of Vegas, so I felt like it wasn't as exotic or off-worldy as it should have been. But the actual plot I'm fine with because it reinforces the notion of learning from your mistakes.
They're telling me to stop, but you guys, if you can just a few seconds, give your thoughts.
Well,
Rob.
I mean, look, I liked the film, but something I might not have liked was I wanted the guerrilla walkers to do something more.
Okay.
That's it.
I think it is probably John Williams' weakest Star Wars score. It's mostly just recycled, which I wish he would have come up with some better themes for this.
Damn it, Cliff, you took mine.
You can dislike the same thing.
I dislike that it is one of the weakest John Williams scores in the franchise.
That was nominated for an Oscar.
The last word from Anthony.
I hated that it caused so much anger and hatred and toxicity on Twitter, on Instagram. If you love the movie, great. If you hate the movie, that's fine too. Just be good to each other and don't be rude. Don't be mean. Don't harass the cast and don't harass the director.
Everything in Star Wars is subject to,
Wow, that
as
was like
Obi-Wan
almost an
said,
Obama type
a
speech,
certain
man.
point of view.
What?
I want to thank this panel here, everyone. Thank you so much for the civil debate. For myself, I'm a big fan. I think the Last Jedi ruled, and I think that we can all disagree, respectfully disagree. This is how you do it, not on Twitter. This is how you have a civil debate. And I respect all the opinions of everyone here, regardless of whether I agree with them. Let's take the debate to the streets of San Diego. Thank you, San Diego Comic-Con. Thank you very much.
Boring conversation anyway.